1951, truce talks were resumed at the tiny farming village of Panmunjom. The UN delegates offered a compromise. They would accept the communist proposed ceasefire along the present battle lines if all other problems could be ironed out within 30 days. If not, all bets were off. The war virtually stopped, except for the constant booming of artillery. Winter came, the deadline was passed, the war was on again. The deadlock issue now was the right of prisoners to free choice in the matter of repatriation. Both sides were adamant. Meantime, across the breadth of Korea were fought the bloody hill battles, names not difficult nor pleasant to remember. Wooded slopes were laid bare, pitted almost beyond believing. This war had reverted to the style of 1914, opposing trench lines facing one another, night patrolling and local attacks across the no man's land which lay between. It was costly, but there was no clear way out. The big break came in April 1953 with little switch. Stalin had died in March, and Malenkov had taken over. Immediately, he launched his worldwide peace offensive, and the Chinese agreed unconditionally to General Clark's standing proposal to exchange sick and wounded prisoners. The exchange went smoothly, and truce talks were resumed. Encouraged, the world listened for news of the final signing that would mean ceasefire in Korea. It came on July 27, 1953. While the communists signed at Panmunjom, General Clark, in ceremonies at the UN base camp in Munsan, signed 6 copies of the document which would end the bloodshed. There was excitement, but little rejoicing.
We have stopped the shooting. That means much to the fighting men and their families, and it will allow some of the grievous wounds of Korea to heal. Therefore, I am thankful. The task now is to put the ceasefire agreement into full effect and get down to working out an enduring settlement of the Korean problem. I cannot find it in me to exult in this hour. Rather, it is a time for prayer, that we may succeed in our difficult endeavor to turn this armistice to the advantage of mankind.
Yes, the free world was happy to see the truce concluded, and the need ended for more white crosses in those faraway military cemeteries in Korea. General Marshal, few of us possess your extensive background from which to draw when evaluating military affairs. In the light of your experience, would you tell us some of your thoughts and conclusions with regard to our country's participation in the Korean War?
One of the most unusual is what might be called our psychological experience. The long truce negotiations, the seemingly interminable haggling by the communists. These things could have been foreseen by us. Red China's leader, Mao Zedong, published in 1945 his outline of communist doctrine. In it, Mao stated clearly that if he ever had to negotiate with a capitalist country, he would use the same delaying and demoralizing tactics used by Trotsky for Lenin at Brest-Litovsk in 1917 and 18, when the Bolsheviks were negotiating with the Germans for an armistice. Now, these same techniques were used by the Chinese communists in Korea. The negotiating table was employed as another battlefield to demoralize us.
General, were there any other aspects of our psychological experience in Korea?
Well, indeed there were. The American troops were the best fighting men the United States has ever delivered to a battlefield. And they fought better than any troops before them. But they had no training in the ideological aspects of war. And so when American troops were captured, they were not prepared for the psychological warfare techniques of communist prison camps. We now know that they don't observe a civilized code and will resort to anything to break a prisoner of war. As a result of this experience, we have taken positive steps to correct this area of training the American soldier.
The relatively new code of conduct for the armed forces is one of the results, is it not, General?
Yes, a direct result of the Korean War.
And we all know how important that code is today. And now, General, what are some of your other conclusions with regard to the war in Korea?
One other point. We learned again in Korea that a trained reserve and ready National Guard are essential to our scheme for survival. I saw hundreds of reservists flown in and fitted into broken units in the great emergency of the 1950-51 winter. These citizen soldiers had been suddenly lifted from their homes, but they kept their chins up. They fought bravely. The 8th Army couldn't have rebounded otherwise. At one time in Korea, our forces were about 50% reserve and National Guard. There's a great payoff in these civilian component programs, and why not? Men fight well because they're Americans. And of course, the harder the training, the better the product.
On behalf of all of us associated with the Big Picture television series, we thank you, Brigadier General S.L.A. Marshall, for your noteworthy comments on the Korean War and your timely recognition of the continuing importance of the Reserve and National Guard programs, which are today an important segment of our military establishment. Now, this is Sergeant Stuart Queen, your host for the Big Picture.
The Big Picture is an official report for the armed forces and the American people. Produced by the Army Pictorial Center. Presented by the Department of the Army in cooperation with this station.